PGA Nation, we are back and we have a fun week ahead. Before we get into it, there's two major congratulations in order. The first one goes to Rory McIlroy, of course. Rory finally getting done in what was the most dramatic golf tournament, the most dramatic Sunday I can remember since Tiger Woods in 2019 at the Masters at the same golf tournament. And because of how it went down and the drama, it may have even been more dramatic than that. But if you're a fan of golf, if you're watching our show and following along, you have to be happy for Rory McIlroy. It was an emotional day for everyone who was invested in it, but it was certainly an exciting outcome, a lot to break down. But the bigger congratulation that's in order is for Team Audience. Team Audience with the first King of the Draft win. Congratulations, Team Audience. Great draft. And even though I stole the first pick and took the winner with the first pick in the draft, you still beat me, which goes to show you the audience had a great draft. The audience knows what they're doing. And can the audience repeat tonight and go 2 weeks in a row? To be determined, but we will be drafting again tonight. Another great field at the RBC Heritage, a no-cut event, 72 golfers, an elevated event with a pretty loaded field. So I'm excited to break it down. But before we do that, Spence, give me your breakdown of the Masters last week. What did you think of the dramatics? What did you think of Rory finally getting it done?
You know, we were talking about this, Joel, early in the week on either Monday or Tuesday. And one of the things you told me, like right as our conversation started, I really feel that this is Rory McIlroy's time. I know I've told you this before, he's going to win. And I told you, I have said this a million times myself. I've gone down this song and dance. I have played this game with him over and over again. I am not shocked Rory won. We were kind of talking off air before we came on. It took everything to go right because everything was inevitably going to go wrong for him. He played the best golf in the tournament. I was telling you that entering Sunday, he was nearly 8 shots better in projected score in my model of any player in the tournament. That is as large of a difference as you are ever going to see in my model. You don't see things get stretched out that far. You date this into Thursday when he was playing his round. He ends up making the worst error you can make. He's center of the fairway at 15. He ends up hitting it over the green, chips it into the water, makes double bogey again on 17, and he finds himself in this position where he's a handful of strokes off the lead entering Friday, but the data still really liked him, and maybe that's what he needed was just a couple of mistakes there. And I was like, okay, he bounced back on Friday. You look on Saturday, he puts together another good round. It looked like, at least according to my model, it was this borderline foregone conclusion to where my model loved Rory. My model absolutely despised Bryson going into that final day. Like there was blow up potential and red flags all over the map with it. And I kind of told anybody that would listen that Rory's going to win this tournament. Anything at this sub minus 200 price is probably value, even though that's not what all of us want to do is be laying minus 200 or a little bit less than that for Rory to end up winning the Masters there. But I mean, if you took that bet, it was definitely not fun. You ended up getting the ticket across the line, but that was an absolute sweat the entire day. It was, you are correct, one of the best golf tournaments I've ever seen. A lot of it had to do with just Rory's emotion and Rory's incapableness of being able to get across the finish line and then hitting these amazing shots in every single situation that once he would mess up, he was within 2 feet. And then he'd mess up again, and then he was back to birding again. It was just a really insane tournament. Congratulations to Rory. I do think, though, I stand by what I said. It was inevitable that when I was finally off of Rory, Rory could have and fly free and win the Masters. So I'm taking partial credit for that, Joel.
Hey, I'll also toot your horn a little bit. You made a good point before the show. I don't think Rory wins that tournament if he's got to make a putt of 10 feet or more. Rory put it close enough where it's like he wasn't going to miss that putt, and that's what he won the tournament. But he had to go out there and put one tight because Rory's just not going to make a long, big putt to win the tournament. That's just not his game. He's going to ball strike you, which is what he did all week. He was the best ball striker by a lot, but he's got to execute those putts and he's got to get tighter. And obviously that should. But if you really think about it, Rory really dominated the field. If you think about just ball striking, how well he played, if he was. If he just eliminated some of those mistakes and made some putts, he would have won by 10 strokes. But nonetheless, nonetheless, he won. He has his green jacket. He has the career Grand Slam, and it is earned. So I'm happy for Rory. But golf moves on, and they don't get a week off after the Masters. So really, some would say that was just a warm-up for this week, which is the RBC Heritage, which is a fun golf tournament. It's unique. I'm excited to hear Spencer's course breakdown because you're definitely going to want to understand this course to pick some golfers this week because it's unique setup, and there's definitely a type of golfer that you are going to want to profile when you're making your picks, and we're going to be able to break that down. Another factor to include is there's a no-cut event, which does change the strategy for DFS. It gives you, in my opinion, the opportunity to take a little bit more risk, guaranteeing yourself 4 days for each golfer. I think it's a more likely scenario that people do a stars and scrubs approach because they can afford some of the big guys, and then the scrubs are going to get 4 days no matter what. So how you do your modeling this week and what you're looking for is going to vary a little bit. You're definitely going to want scoring. You don't necessarily need every single golfer to be in the top 10 or top 15 as long as they get a lot of birdies and they can accumulate points over 4 days. So if you're not taking into that account when you're drafting your lineups, that is a mistake because it is going to score differently. That's how you'll be able to make points and potentially win some money this weekend on DraftKings. So without further ado, Spence, we're heading down to Hilton Head. What are you looking for on the course this week down in South Carolina?
Yeah, as I get into this, I think this is probably the best way for us to do this, Joel. Let's have the audience put in what they would like the draft order to be so we can get in front of that right now and get ready to go as soon as I'm done with this. But we have Harbor Town. It's a little under 7,200 yards, par 71. It's initially built in 1969. It's a Pete Dye track that accentuates any of those strategic concepts that you might expect out of one of his courses. We play a lot of Dye venues on tour. We talk about them quite frequently. One of the notes that I will add to this, though, is that Jack Nicklaus helped him on the project. That was the first time that when Nicklaus was young that he really got to work on a property in his career. So I think this ended up building him as a creator of golf courses as time went on. You have tight tree-lined fairways. It's going to forge this path of a less than driver appeal on most of these holes. The real difference maker for me with the way that I built my model came down to this massive increase in the second shot expectations that you get from 125 to 200 yards. A lot of forced layups put you into the same proximity bucket over and over again. We see 10.4% more shots that occur from that range of 125 to 200 than an average stop on tour. And that's highlighted by just less than a 9% reduction in anticipated approaches from over 200 yards. This is about as few of approach shots from over 200 yards as you're going to get. Strong winds are always one of the variables because wind can wreak havoc on this tournament. The coastal design. The one thing that does mitigate that a little bit is that the tree-lined impact that comes into play. But at the end of the day, it's a second shot golf course. You're going to have to make putts from 5 to 15 feet. And you do have a venue that's littered with 18 water hazards and numerous sand traps that you're going to have to avoid for this very strategic Pete Dye course.
Boom. Pete Dye course, very strategic. Definitely listen back. Spencer gives the most in-depth course breakdown in the industry. It's critical to have an understanding of the type of golfer that should find success on the course this week. That will give you your edge and help you to make some winning picks. We're also going to draft teams tonight. Team audience, we need a draft order from you. First person to drop the draft order in the chat, Zach, anointing you team captain per usual, will be the order we will go with. Audience, if you want to go first, you can. If you want to go last, you name it, but drop your order in. We'll give you 10 more seconds. If we don't get an order in 10 seconds, then we're gonna have to pick for you because we gotta get this draft moving. We're drafting 3 teams tonight. I'm also gonna drop it in the chat as a reminder. Boom. And then we need to pick a winner. So, audience, you won last week by really just having a really well-balanced draft. Even just picking the winner of the tournament isn't always enough, right? Just picking one guy, right, like I did last week, but the rest of my draft could have done better. It wasn't the best draft that I've had. So I'm looking for redemption. There's a few guys I really like this week. Like Spencer was saying, I think there's a few guys that this course fits really well, especially as their form is rounding into shape. So I know what pick I want as long as I hope the audience puts me in a place to do so. Audience, disappointed by your efforts this evening. I'm not sure what's going on. Zach, you're usually steering the ship. But if no one drops one here, there he is. Zach coming through with an order. Audience going first. Zach, you're going to be steering the ship tonight as the audience captain. So we're going to rely on you in ensuring the pits get locked in, and there's plenty of nominations to go around. So, Zach, with the first pick, did you have someone in mind? Get your nominations in. As a reminder, in case anyone is new to the show tonight, the way the draft works is we're going to be drafting 3 teams. It works like your typical fantasy football snake-style draft. Audience, you'll be going first, Spencer second, me third. I'll have 2 in a row, and then we'll go back. The one caveat here is you do need to be able to afford your lineup in a real DraftKings tournament. So therefore, you can't take all the best golfers. You need to make sure you can afford each guy and actually play them in a DraftKings lineup. It looks like the first nominations are in, but no one has been doubled. So Morikawa and Scheffler on the board. Anyone gets doubled, you can lock that in. While we wait for that final nomination to lock the pick in, Spence, I want to ask you, I find it interesting that they aren't dropping Scottie Scheffler's price. Now, he's still playing well. It's not like, oh, he's not playing well, everyone get off him. He's still playing well, but he's not playing $1,300 well. It's hard to justify paying that much just because if you play someone like Scottie Scheffler at the price you have to pay for him, it's going to be really hard to then get a well-rounded lineup in. Do you think the $1,300 price tag for Scottie Scheffler is too rich? Do you think it should be adjusted? Or do you still think that price is fair?
If you look at ownership projections right now, and it looks like Colin Morikawa is the pick, and I'll kind of lead this into my selection here. I think from a game theory perspective, and you talked about it at the beginning, Joel, there's a lot of different ways that you can try to create lineups this week. There's the boom or bust approach where it's that stars and scrubs sort of lineup. There's also that needs to be taken into account that you need to have quality finishes from all 6 of your golfers. And if you go too far down the scale and you don't get those finishes, it's going to make it more wonky of what kind of production you're actually going to get, because a $13,100 Scottie Scheffler does put you into a bucket where it's harder to fill out a lineup the way that you would like it to be. I wrote this into my one of my Rotoballer articles earlier in the week. You're starting to now enter this territory with Scottie Scheffler. You have him at 13-1. The second name is Oberg at $11,000. So you have a $2,100 difference. Push comes to shove. You're going to have to make a decision on, are you going to play Scottie? What is a price tag that is fair? I think that this is not the days where he was $13,000 and there was a $5,000 salary beneath it on the names at the bottom. There is a real decision that needs to be made. And what's interesting about this, at least from my early projections, people seem to want to play Scottie Scheffler at a rate that is going to be between 35 and 40% right now, according to my numbers. And we are still really out into the week to where in the next 24 hours, this will settle into some sort of a territory. But I was surprised to see even at 13,100, Scottie is deriving essentially a 37.03% return. To me, that means that he's probably not even expensive enough if that's what's going to continue happening. But I think Colin Morikawa is unfortunately the correct first pick. I think he is the optimal start that you can make for your lineup. And unfortunately, now it's going to have to make me pivot from where I'm going to go. So I'm going to go with the other name that I think is a really nice spot where there are 2 golfers that come to mind. And I will name the second one as we move across in the show that were very, very disappointing at the Masters. Tons of ownership around them. Terrible Thursday round from Henley. He ends up getting himself back into contention a little bit. On Friday, misses the cut. I'm going to take Russell Henley here, though, at $9,700. I see about 17% ownership. Harbortown is a really ideal course fit for him. My model, and this is something that I even said at Augusta, I know that was a long course. A lot of people fell into the trap of what that ownership was. I am one of those people. This is a better course setup, though, than even that one. I think he's a legitimate top 3 or 4 win equity player on the slate. I think this $9,700 price tag might even be a little bit higher if you would have seen a Masters performance that was better than it was. And at least for the ownership percentage, I don't think you're looking at 17%. I think you're probably looking at more like 25% plus if he doesn't miss the cut. So I will take Russell Henley here, and I'll kick it on to you, Joel, to make your pick.
All right. Russell Henley off the board. And one thing, Spence, I'm going to laugh. I don't think either one of us knows. We're not even sharing the draft board. We're not even in our flow to realize, oh, no one can even see we're drafting, which is, so we apologize, but We will get back on track. Draft board is up. We are flowing. 2 picks off the board. Listen, I like both picks here. This is a course that, they're both guys are similar inside. Ball strikers, not going to rely on distance as much. I think the prices you're paying up for a little bit of both of them there, but both guys have plenty of upside. So I like where this draft is going thus far. For me, I have 2 in a row here. And I know exactly how my full draft I want to go, as long as all these guys kind of get to me throughout the draft. But I'm going to start with my value picks off the board first. And the first 2 picks I'm going to take, first one is going to be no surprises. He's someone I take rather consistently in these drafts if you followed along, and that's Daniel Berger. I think this is another course that just sets up really nice for him. If you're following along, he's been really coming around recently. Daniel Berger was a top 20 golfer in the world 3 years ago. He got hurt. He kind of fell off the face of the earth, but the results are coming back. He's a really good course fit for him. The proximity numbers that you need here. He's some of the best on tour. He's got a really good course history. He's had some good results here before, including a top 5, T21 in 2022, T13 in 2021. Even more recently, hasn't had worse than a T30 in his last 5 outings. So the form is there. I think it's now time for an upside, maybe a top 10. I think he can get you that this week. And I'm going to pair Berger with my second pick, who's going to be Bud Cauley. And Bud Cauley is another guy who I've taken now a few times this year. I think we've told everyone before, Bud Cauley is a guy who's a big-time prospect in college. Had a big injury, didn't really do much as a pro early on. But now his game is really coming together. If you look at it, the results recently, Bud Cauley has 3 top 10s in his last 3 outings. So if he's not on your radar, it's time to get him on your radar. He's gained strokes off the tee in the last 3 outings since the Players. He's gained 8 strokes on approach at the Valspar, 4.5 at the Valero, and he's gained strokes putting in each of those 3 tournaments. So, he's typically good around the greens. He's lost strokes around the greens the last 2 weeks, but that's usually a strength. I think he gets that right. I think you have a really good week here from Bud Cauley. He's got some consistency going. I think the main question is, I don't think Bud Cauley is now a top 10 golfer in the world. Eventually, this streak has to end. He's not going to get top 10 every week for the rest of the year. But I do think this course sets up well for his game. I think we get a good result this week. So Bud Cauley and Daniel Berger off the board. Spence, would love to hear from you. Are you interested in either of those picks? And then you're up with your second.
Cauley has been a name, it feels like, for last handful of weeks where the price tag continues to be too cheap on him. You see the $7,500 price tag. I was expecting more ownership than what we currently have. I see sub 10% right now. I don't have a problem of continuing to go back to the well on names like Daniel Berger, Bud Cauley until we get better pricing in the space. Like Berger has finally gotten a bit of a price increase, but even at 8,300, it's probably not where it should be for the quality of what you talked about, Joel. So I think those are 2 good value picks that you made that really open things up. The question here is, can Cauley stay hot? That is the unknown here. I think, though, until we see, this is the Eric Cole conundrum that we were in a year ago, give or take, to where Cole just kept churning out result after result after result. And the books and DFS pricing kept not moving him on the slate. And Cole was just a top 10, 20 machine for the longest time, with books never adjusting the price with it. So until we get a change up here from Cauley, I'm fine going back to the well on him. I think it's a really good price there in that mid $7,000 range. I guess I will make my pick very simple, and I'll keep it short here. So I talked about there being 2 names that massively underachieved. Henley is one of them. The other one is Sepp Straka. Straka was massively owned at the Masters. And if you look at what he did even more so than Henley, he shot himself completely out of the tournament on day 1. And through about 13, 14, 15 holes on Friday, was the best person on the course and had gotten himself into a position that he should have made the weekend. He implodes on 18. He ends up, unfortunately, missing the cut. I think Henley and Straka, though, it's like the same exact answer where you can say that they're 15 to 18% owned. I think these numbers at these price tags are probably more in that 25% zone if you don't have the miscut that we got from them. So I'm still considering this a buy low spot for both of them. There were 3, 6, 9, 10 players for me, which is a pretty high number, that graded inside of the top 30 for all 6 statistical categories that I ran this week. Henley was one of them. Straka's the other one. So I'm just going to take these 2 names here that I think really allow me to kind of go any route that I want throughout the rest of my build here. And it keeps everything open.
Well, that's a great pick. It's a steal for me. Straka was already listed on my board as one of my next picks, so I'm going to have to pivot. But I agree with you, and it's one of those things. We've said this on the show a bunch in the past. He was obviously a little bit disappointing last week. Everyone was on him. He was popular. Are people going to go away from him now because he didn't come through last week? Not that much has changed in 1 week. Maybe he disappointed 1 week. He's still a really great golfer. The form is still there. The Masters is a unique beast of its own. I think he rebounds this weekend as a Master Week. So I like that pick. I'm curious to see what the ownership comes in at, but I have a feeling it's going to be lower than anticipated, which is a really good thing. Audience, you are on the clock. You have 2 in a row. So get a lot of nominations in, get a lot of doubles in, because you need to lock in 2 picks here. David K and Jack Fisher with 2 nominations. Does Bhatia count as the pick there? Because David K mentioned Akshay. Yeah, Bhatia is locked in. There you go. Captain Zach, if there's any disagreements, take your grievances up with Zach as your captain. It is not on me. He locked you in, so it is Zach's the one to blame if you disagree. Thank you, Zach, for leading them along. We need one more. As we get those nominations in, let's go back to you, Spence. Akshay, are you interested in him this week?
Joel, what the fuck is going on right now? Like, this is 2 direct steals from the audience. One of the things that I wrote this week is you look at Akshay, whether it's 75, 80 to 1, I would argue that Akshay is one of the best outright values on the entire board. I bet to win a unit. Like, that's my standard bet on matchups. I have a 1.4 unit risk just about on Akshay over Taylor Pendrith this week. I think Bhatia is playable across pretty much the entire board, whether we're talking placements, matchups, outrights. I think this is a really nice buy low spot for him after he made the cut at the Masters. A little bit of a disappointing 4 days that he put together all around, but absolutely floored that a sub 10% Akshay Bhatia just went at the 203 right before me. Now it kind of makes me question everything that I've done with this build.
So at least it's a steal. The audience with a good pick. Spencer is on him. You need one more. A lot of nominations in, a lot of guys that I like, but we need one double. The audience, you got to come together and agree on the final pick. It looks like it's locked in. Another guy that's on my radar, Lucas Glover. Lucas Glover was a guy that I was really high on last week. Again, disappointed at the Masters. I think it's another spot to rebuy, right? I think people might come off him a little bit after a disappointing result. Like we said before, the Masters is a different beast. I think he can rebound. And, of course, that should be a really good course fit for him in the 6K range. I think Lucas Glover is a great value pick. I think the audience's team is off to a really great start. The audience is threatening to do 2 in a row here. So I like what the audience is doing here. Spence, would love to hear from you. Are you interested in Glover this week? And then who are you going to take with your third?
Yeah, I think Glover's one of the better values also in that $6,000 range, inside of the top 25 of all iterations of my model. Out of about $1,000 more expensive of what he should be here. So I think it's a very quality pick from the audience in this spot. And as I said, this Bhatia thing really threw a monkey wrench into the festivities of what I'm trying to do here. I'm going to go a volatile route here, Joel, and I don't know that I'm going to actually be able. It really is tilt at this point. So I'm just going to forget all, like, there is a certain thing that we do, Joel, where we try not to talk about picks openly and loudly because we're not trying to influence the draft one way or another. Honestly, I'm just trying to get people off of my players. I was going to take Brian Harman here. I'm not going to take Brian Harman here anymore. I am throwing a complete. I don't even actually know if I can do this and figure out a build. Before I do this, Joel, talk for 1 second and let me make sure that I can actually figure out a lineup here.
Well, what I find to be very interesting, I'm hesitant to even say this, but I guess since you brought it up and I'm on the spot, I'm going to say it. There's no way Brian Harman's getting back to you. So if you're not going to take Brian Harman here, I can't imagine a world where I don't take him on the turn. I think he's a really great course fit. The price is right. Harman's a guy that I would have considered with one of my first 2 picks. I even think some of the folks in the audience were considering Brian Harman. So we know you thought about him. You're passing on him, but that might prove to be a mistake because he's probably not going to get back to you. And I won't even call it a steal anymore because you had your opportunity here. So Spence, you're on the clock. Who are you going?
I'm going to go with Brian Harman for one reason.
Oh,
This is not an influence here, Joel. I was going to take Scotty Scheffler. I was trying to figure out what this build would look like. I'd have $6,100 left over. I have a name at 6,000 that I'm fine taking. I have a name at 6,200 that I'm fine taking. It's too exact for me to feel comfortable. I also need a third name in there, which I unfortunately don't have at this moment that I would even feel comfortable putting into this build. So I will take Brian Harman kind of for all the reasons that I think the audience has mentioned, you've mentioned. Harman is a top 10 player for me this week inside of my model. I really wanted to find a way, though, to take Scotty. And if roles had been reversed and I hadn't taken one of Schreck or Henley, I probably would have pivoted in this spot and taken Scotty in this position and just done a completely different build. But that's kind of what you get when you draft in the middle. It's unfortunately, the audience gets everything on one end, you get everything on the other end. I just want to make sure I can actually create a build this week that works. So not trying to steal what you were going to do. I for whatever it's worth, Joel, you did not influence this one way or another by opening your mouth and saying that, but it's just one of these things where I can't afford to line up the way that I want with Scotty.
Fair enough. I get it. Well, now, listen, maybe you influenced me. I wasn't going to take Scotty, but now that he's there and you kind of made it sound intriguing, he's 1,300. Can I afford him? I'm just going to do a little quick math equation. It's going to make it tough for me to afford him if I take Scotty. I could, but it's going to be tough. I'm not going to.
I think you should.
Here's the thing, because what I was saying earlier in the show. Scotty's, I still think, is the best player in the world. I mean, maybe Rory has tied him at this point, but Scotty's incredible week to week. He's still incredible, but he's not as good as he was last year. And to pay $1,300 for someone, they need to be dominant. And even a fifth place out of Scotty with what the rest of your lineup looks like, I just don't think is good enough. And I just find it hard to be a competitive lineup. I wouldn't be shocked even if Scotty won the tournament and he wasn't in the winning lineup. I think that's even possible because of how expensive he is. So that's why I'm passing him. I think it's just a roster construction thing. And the way I'm going to do it, I'm going to go with course history. I'm going to go with the full course history round here. There's two guys that stand out as guys that are almost like course specialists here for me, and I'm going to take both of them, starting with Patrick Cantlay, who we know, he comes here every year, and he tends to really have an eye for this course. Patrick Cantlay almost top fives every time he plays. I mean, from 2022, 2, 3, T3. He missed the cut in 2021, but before that, T3 again, T7, T3. So, Cantlay is not in the best form he's ever had, but he's certainly not in poor form. And him showing up at this course is certainly the time for him to go out there and get another top 5, at least top 10, which I think he'll get me. And then the other guy is JT Poston. JT Poston, all he does every year is show up on this course and give you a great result. He's, one of the guys that really just plays above his skill level at this course. He's given us, since 2019, he's given us 4 top 10s. And this isn't a guy that consistently top 10s every week. He's giving you 2 missed cuts as well. But when he's playing, when he's on, he's going to give you a really good result here. And I think his form is in good enough shape to get that really good result. Now, he did lose strokes on approach each of the last 2 weeks, but one was at the Masters. And if you look before the last 2 weeks, he's gained strokes on approach in the last 7 tournaments consecutively. I think he finds some of that form coming back to a course that we know he likes. And at only 7,600 here, I think the price is 7,800. The price is right where it's a value play that gives you top 10 upside. So I feel like I went a little safer on my picks here with Cantlay and JT Poston, but I think you get 2 really good results, and I'm pleased with the way this turn went for me. So, Spence, back to you. I know I took the 2 course history picks here. Are you interested this week in both Cantlay and Poston?
I don't know who said this, so I don't want to take away from this, but I did laugh on Twitter today. Did you see that some kid apparently asked Patrick Cantlay for his autograph, and Xander and Adam Scott and everybody signed? And apparently, I don't know this to be true, but from what I read, Patrick Cantlay did not sign for the kid. And the person tweeted and said, well, in fairness, this is Patrick Cantlay's major at this point. Like, this is the tournament that he gets up to. The course history is amazing for Patrick Cantlay. I think there is a stigma around him that has consistently come into play that people don't usually want to play him. So it is interesting in this spot that I see about 22% ownership right now, which is going to put him as the 3rd highest owned golfer on the slate. I guess this is the one event that people are still willing to trust him, but I don't know what to think about Patrick Cantlay anymore. And as you gave that pick, I'm going to give the other golfer that I really don't know what to think about either. And I was either going to take Cantlay or the name that I took. And these are two names that I just cannot seem to get right any of these weeks. But I'm going to take Justin Thomas here. Feel like that's still the one upside target that I have in my model other than Scotty Scheffler that has top 5 upside for me inside of my build. Not exactly what you wanted to see out of him last week at the Masters, but the way that this board played itself out for me, it's kind of forced my hand. It's a 72-man field at the end of the day, and I feel like from an upside perspective of the lineup that I have, this gives me the best potential to go that boom or bust route with it that I'm kind of trying to look to take on at this point.
All right, listen, fair enough. Lock in Justin Thomas. He was someone, when we started this draft, I had penciled in. I pivoted off, but he's one of the guys up in that 10K range that I like. And that's the kind of argument or the decision you have to make when we keep talking, referencing Scotty. Like, I feel like Justin Thomas and Cantlay are close enough to Scotty where the extra 3K in savings make it worth kind of taking a shot on one of those guys. So that's the strategy we're talking about. Audience, we need 2 from you. It looks like some nominations are coming in. We're going to need those seconded. But don't forget, you're getting 2 in a row here. So David K., we appreciate you. Spieth and Hovland have been thrown out as nominations along with Rye, Benny Ann, and there it is. Spieth locked in as the first audience pick. You need one more, so keep those nominations coming. Spence, back over to you. This is a good course fit for Jordan Spieth. He's been kind of a mixed bag. We've seen some good results from him this year. We've seen some disappointing results from him this year. How was Jordan Spieth grading out for you this week?
18th for me overall. Inside of the top 15 for safety, a little bit of negative trajectory for upside. I think there's a lot of ownership around him at $9,200. Like it's too boom or bust for me in this particular situation to want to take. And I know I just took Justin Thomas and gave the same spiel for it, but I mean, even when you're comparing these two, I know there's $1,000 difference. I would rather, if I'm comparing apples to oranges here, I think I'd rather spend $1,000 more on Justin Thomas and have a little bit more of that win equity that I'm looking for at about 2 or 3 less percent of ownership than to be in this 20% Jordan Spieth range. Like, not a massive take against him when he's 18th and, his price tag is 11. So I think you kind of have borderline neutral value, but it's just more of the lack of leverage would be the best way to put it of what you're getting here with Jordan Spieth. You're really taking on what he has been at this course with that win in 2022 and the second in 2023. I know the results look better with 2 consecutive top 15 finishes, but I mean, for me, it's probably I'm lukewarm at best, and I'm probably out personally.
All right, there you have it. We need a sec. Oh, the second's locked in with Aaron Rye. Aaron Rye, I thought was an intriguing pick this week. I was pretty interested in him when I started doing research this week. I came a little down. I'm still going to have some exposure to Rye this week, but I came down a little bit. I'm not sure about his short game this week for me, but the ball striking's there. So, Spence, I'd love to get your take. Are you going to be rostering Aaron Rye this week?
Rye was one of the very quick sharp movers in the market. I saw his outright price get borderline dismantled in a lot of spots. I have seen his matchups move very heavily in his favor. He's moved in a favorite against Sepp Straka. He has moved as a big favorite against Jason Day. He has moved as a big favorite against Robert McIntyre. He's a substantial favorite. And these are all like minus 120 or above against Sung Jae Im. Even if you look at the price against him against Xander Schauffele, that number has steadily been falling on sites like FanDuel and DraftKings throughout the week. So, I think it's a fair price tag of what you're getting on him here at $7,900. I think you have a nice safety rating that is going to put him as a very small value for me. Not quite so sure I'm as high as the market, but I do think Aaron Rye, this is a very prototypical setup of where you would expect him to find success with the way that he's accurate off the tee and a lot of these buckets that we're looking at for the week that end up having a little bit of an increase in my model. He's not necessarily the best iron player across the board, but I do have an uptick from him from that 175 to 200 plus yard range there, which puts him as a little bit of a leverage there of if you're just comparing what he is at this course versus what his proximity is elsewhere.
Boom. All right. Listen, the audience off to a great start. I really like the look of this audience squad. I think the audience has a real shot to go back to back. Spence, you got two more here. You got Thomas off the board. About, I can't really see the number. Is it, how much is your average per pick? Is it 6,800 per?
68.50, yes.
68.50 per, which, is interesting because we're all a little bit in different ranges in our next pick. So it should give you some freedom. But tell us, Spence, what value plays you're looking for to finish off your squad?
One of the reasons why I went with Justin Thomas is I was kind of hoping that it would put me in a position where I was just not drafting in the same spot as everybody else. We talked about it a lot, Joel. It's a 72-man field. It's very, very quick that players, once somebody is taken, once a name, like I'll give a couple examples here, like once an Akshay Bhatia is off the board, which I'm still not over that the audience has taken, once a name like Bud Cauley that Joel has taken is off the board, it makes it more difficult if you don't have a lot of options that you want to get to and you're kind of forcing spots around it. So I'm going to take a golfer here that was one of my better values on the board. I was shocked to see some of the returns I had for him, and it's not quite the same return that we're getting with Bud Cauley here because you do have missed cuts and finishes outside of the top 50. But what I will note is you have 3 finishes from Jacob Bridgman at 6,700 that have been inside of the top 15 in his last 5 tournaments. I always run all these statistical categories to try to find players that fit a certain threshold return over and over again. And when I looked at golfers of the 6 categories, of the main 6 categories that I ran, that landed inside of the top 30 of all 6 of them, the lowest name outside of Jacob Bridgman that fit that criteria was Brian Harman at 7,600. The next lowest was Akshay Bhatia at 77. You have to get all the way up to Sepp Straka at 8,800 to get to the next name there. Jacob Bridgman was the one golfer lower than that was top 30 in all the statistical categories that I was looking at. So I do think there is a nature here that is a little bit volatile. It is a little bit boom or bust, but I see sub 5% ownership. That is something I am definitely willing to take here with Jacob Bridgman.
All right, Jacob Bridgman off the board. I'll be honest, not on my radar this week. Interesting pick. Someone I'm going to have to look into for sure. Also, welcome to the chat, Byron, calling me out for buttering up the audience, which is true. It's exactly what I was doing. I was trying to get you buttered up. Listen, you beat me once already this week. I got to do something to get on your good graces. You guys are the current king of the draft. Byron, welcome back to the show. If you know Byron, I'm back 9 bets. Great content always. We would love to have him back on the show drafting with us soon. All right, I got 2 to round out my draft here. I have enough salary to spend. To be honest with you, I'm not fully locked in on my picks. I have the value pick I want, but the problem is it doesn't leave me enough money to get the guy I want up top. So I'm just going to take him, and I'm going to have to figure out who I'm going to pair him with from there. I'm going to go ahead and lock in here Tom Hoge. The ball striking with Tom Hoge has been spectacular. I think they've had him just underpriced at this point at only 7,100. I thought that was a disservice for him. He gave you a top 20 here last time he went out. But if you look at the recent form is really just spectacular. If you take a closer look at it, he's gained 7 strokes ball striking at the Masters. He gained 2.5 strokes at the Valero. He's given you a 14, 5, and 3 in his last 3 outings. He's gained over 2 strokes putting in each of the last 4 tournaments he's played in. The one thing that you're going to want to be a little weary of is his around the green game, which has not been very strong. It's actually been pretty bad, and that could be an issue here. So my hope is his ball striking so good, he's not around the green, and he's just making putts, getting it and hitting greens. And if that's the case, I think he gives you another top 10. So give me Tom Hoge here. The issue is that now leaves me with 9,300, which I would have been pretty happy if I could have gotten to Lowry or Fleetwood, but I just missed that, so I can't do that. So now I got to make a tough decision between Victor Hovland and Jason Day. I really like the way Jason Day's been playing. Jason Day's not a guy I typically take. I don't know the last time I ever played him, but he's been playing really well. I like the current form. Even at the Masters last week, he gave you a top 20. It was a pretty good result. He gave you a top 10, excuse me. It was really strong around the greens. It's a little bit mixed bag of the ball striking. I do think Jason Day and between Jason Day and Victor Hovland, I think Jason Day is the safer pick of the two. But I still believe Victor Hovland gives you more upside, and he kind of fits the same narrative that I'm going with Tom Hoge in that if he's just striking the ball really well and making putts, you don't really need to be around the green. And if he is around the green a lot, it's going to issue, and we're not going to win anyway. So I'm going to bet Hovland just has a great week ball striking and he makes some putts and gets you us a great result. So I'm going to lock in the upside play of Victor Hovland with my last pick, which is funny because coincidentally, this is almost exactly how it played out for me last week, where I ended up kind of getting stuck with Hovland and it worked out, all things considered. So I'm not upset about it. Spence, back over to you here. Would love to get your take on both Tom Hoge and Victor Hovland, and then you got one.
Whether or not this ends up being correct, I do not know. Between Victor Hovland and Jason Day, and as the resident Jason Day former whisperer that did have him as my best piece of my lineup last week, very fitting on it, I think Hovland was the correct choice to make between the two. I'm not a huge fan of Day this week, so I like the Hovland pick. Hoagie seems to always be a value at these approach tests, so I think it was a very savvy route that you went on those two there. There are a couple names, and I kind of will run you through my thought process here because there's a handful of different ways that I could end this, but I'm going to go the direction here, and I'll get to the name in a second, that I think kind of provides the best content maybe for this show, just because it makes it so different of a lineup. Like, it's a 72-man field. I want to make sure my lineup is as unique as it can be. So when I look at this board and I have $7,000 left over, there are a handful of names. Glover would have been in consideration had Joel not taken him. I think Steven Yeager is a really interesting pick. That is kind of the best value that I technically have on the board from the upside total. Eric Cole comes into play. Ryan Gerard. Those are all names. Max Grazerman. Like that. Those are, any of those options fit. I'm going to take the opposite route, though. I'm going to go to the very bottom of the board here, and I'm going to leave myself $1,000 on the table because I don't think there's a substantial difference between any of those players that I named and Matt Kuchar. If you look at Matt Kuchar at this tournament, and we can date this back to, we're talking about 20 plus years now, he just consistently finds success at this tournament. We're talking about top 25 finish after top 25 finish. So I'm going to take Matt Kuchar, $6,000. That just immediately separates my build from a unique perspective just by leaving that much money on the table.
I love that idea. And again, like Spencer said, it's something you can do guaranteed all 4 days. We know he's had a good history. He has the upside. It's different. I like that pick. I think it was a sneaky way to finish out the draft there. Audience, you got one last pick. So get those final nominations in. You got to lock it in. $7,400 to spend, so $7,400 or less to lock it in. We'll wait on those nominations. DFS Chef with the comment, no cut event, which is true. He doesn't see any of these lineups being overly chalky versus leverage field. He expects most of these lineups to be stars or scrubs. I agree. There's probably going to be a lot of stars or scrubs this week. I don't think you're going to run into too many duplicated lineups this week. I think there's plenty of variants at top where there's different stars that guys want to go to. But I think there's going to be a lot of variants in build type. But that's what's unique about this show. It doesn't allow you to really draft your optimal lineup because we're all competing against each other. So you have to pivot at certain spots and find other plays in different areas to make your lineup work. I like what that does because it doesn't mean it doesn't really allow you to take the full chalk lineup because some of those guys are going to get taken. So it forces you to be unique at some level. I always every week play the lineup I draft in some tournament because I think it's a unique way to say, hey, I like these guys. It might not have been my optimal, but it's a unique, different lineup that I would have played otherwise. So it's a fun way to do it. Audience, Zach, come on, Zach, you're the captain of the team. You don't really just took Tom Hoge, Zach. Oh man, listen, you are current king of the draft, so I can't give you the audience too much crap here. But Zach, we need that final pick in, and we need it to be a golfer that's not already been taken in this draft. Additional nominations coming in while we wait to finalize that last pick. Spencer, is there anyone? Obviously, they only have 7,500 to pick, so what we'll do for now until that audience finalizes their pick. Is there anyone above 7,400 that you're surprised did not get taken today?
Scotty Scheffler. I know we only have 3 people drafting, and kind of as you just discussed a second ago to DFS Chef's question, there is a natural progression of this show of how it works to where lineups just inherently become unique because you don't necessarily always get who you want in every single spot. So there is a roster construction and a game theory and a building lesson that can always be learned of how can you get different in these spots. I will say, I think he is 100% correct though. most people are going to want to go with the stars or scrubs approach. I think that when you do go that direction, anything Scotty with that $13,100 price tag does put you in a range that does make it much more likely that your lineups look very similar to everybody else. So I would be cognizant of that fact as I'm building Scotty Scheffler lineups. I think the other name that I at least want to point that out for is Colin Morikawa. There was a lot of people that are going to go to him, and rightfully so. That would have been my 101 in this draft. Just be aware of your contest selection. Be aware of the aggregated ownership percentage that you have built through your lineups. And when you weigh those two factors out, you can kind of realize how chalky or contrarian you can get in a lot of these spots. And it's going to come down fully to contest selection.
Boom. Yeah, absolutely. And, you definitely don't want to just play the same lineup in all different types of contests. There's golfers that are more suited for safety and for cash, and there's guys with upside. So you can play different guys in different types of lineups. The final pick is locked in. Spence, you locked in Thigala, which I think is controversial because I don't think Thigala's a pick. I think it's Davis Thompson. Again, Zach Jeffers as the captain, confusing us. There's already some controversy in the draft. This might be at the end of the day, I'm not sure if this draft is going to be legitimate. There might be a protest to the findings of Team Audience's draft because we don't know if that should be Thigala or Davis Thompson. Davis Thompson is who I believe it should be, so that's who's being locked in. But I don't know if it can be officially crowned a dual king because there's controversy around the pick. We'll lock in Davis Thompson, and the audience will wish you guys good luck. It is a good-looking squad, so we'll see how that plays out. I think any of the three lineups here this week could win. I think all three teams are competitive lineups, and it'll be really interesting to see the scores and how it plays out. But of course, before we wrap up tonight, smash the like button and give us a follow. It goes a long way. We super appreciate it. We're going to leave the draft board up. Let us know which team you think is going to win. Drop it in the chat. Follow us on Twitter. Let us know which team you think is best. We're going to come back next week. We're going to crown a king of the draft again, and we'll draft all over again and have some fun doing it. Before we get you out of here tonight, Spence, what is your go-to, your highest exposure, your number one bet of the week?
Akshay Bhatia over Taylor Pendrith is the most exposure to any wager that I have. I got it at minus 115 for 1.4 units. That was over on FanDuel and DraftKings. I am bringing it up right now. I believe those numbers are still available there, and that's usually not the case on a lot of the matchups that I give. Those numbers move very, very quickly. FanDuel and DraftKings are the harder two of the books to move, but I believe those numbers are still there. And I think Bhatia, with the audience picking him at 203, that might end up being the best selection on the entire board taken. So I think the audience got off to a really hot start there with Morikawa and Akshay. Really like the lineup that they've put together for the most part. And they are viable threats, Joel, to say the least, to be able to go back-to-back this week to start this show's history.
They really are. As we say every week, and just a reminder, audience, I always have fun with you guys. We have a good banter, but the reality is our show is made by the audience. We appreciate you guys showing up every week. You guys are off to a hot start on King of the Draft. We appreciate you. I hope you guys don't win too many in a row. Me and Spencer got to get one eventually. But the audience does a great job, and that's what makes the show. So we appreciate you guys. Again, another great draft. But again, this is a great tournament. I actually don't love that it's the week after the Masters because I think it takes away a little bit of the excitement of the tournament because it's coming off of the biggest week of the year. But let's not lose sight of the fact that it's a loaded field, which we're not getting as often as we used to. It's a fun tournament to watch on TV. It's an elevated event. And there's some money to be made this week. I think there is a style and form of golfer that you want to target. They can give you an edge. And I think we've laid that out for you tonight on the show. So we're going to go out there and make some money. Spence, do you have an outright ticket that you like this week before we let everyone out of here?
I mean, all roads seem to lead back to Akshay Bhatia, but that's actually the only outright number that I've actually taken at this point. I talked in my article, I like Russell Henley, I like Colin Morikawa. Those are two names that I'm going to be very heavily trying to look into this week as the event begins on Thursday. But Bhatia is the only outright ticket that I have. And then I do want to shout out something that I saw Jeff Feinberg say, and I agree with him wholeheartedly with this. First of all, I am not a big fan. I know he was mentioning he's not a big fan of these elevated events. Unfortunately, you take a course like Harbor Town here. This course has enough identity, enough history. We don't need this to be a no-cut 72-man field. Like, this tournament works really well when it was a full-size event. Like, I am not a big fan in general of these elevated events, and I think it's a lackluster spot on the schedule. There is this hangover that is occurring from the Masters, and now we're rolling out to one of the biggest events of the year, and you just have names like Rory and Hideki that don't want to play this event and are taking the week off. And it's very unfortunate that we're not seeing all the best players here if we're calling it an elevated event. And unfortunately, now it's put us in this spot to where we don't probably get the full identity of what this course could be.
There you have it. Well, yeah, good question here. Spence, you want to take this one?
I just think that there's a lack of appeal at the end of the day with it. I think that they're going to put their money where they want it to be. I mean, it's even when you look at FanDuel and DraftKings on the betting side of things, unfortunately, they're getting later and later putting out a lot of these numbers. I know for them, DFS is different. In a DFS contest, the more people that you can get to enter, the better on it for all the rake that they're going to make. But I think they just deem it to be a lack of appeal, unfortunately, and you don't get as great of contest selections for those.
And just to level set with everyone, the question was, why do you guys feel DK puts out such shitty contests for alternate field events? Do you feel with better contests, more people would enter? I do think there would be more enters with better contests, obviously. But I think one of the bigger issues, at least at what I've seen the trend being, DK usually lines the events that they're running with what else is happening. So, for example, if there's NBA playoff games, if there's football games, if there's mixed martial arts, UFC, what have you, you'll probably get a worse DraftKings contest because it's competing. Where if you get a weekend where there's no other sports, and even if it's a shitty golf tournament, it's the only tournament, you're going to get some loaded DraftKings tournaments because that's people are going to go play. So it really is kind of like, what is that up against? So if it's an alternate field event and it's up against even like another golf tournament, it's probably not going to be the best contest because it's going to dilute the players who are putting in contests.
Sharper people would want to enter those contests. I think your average Joe is going to be more inclined to make a mistake and unfortunately enter the wrong tournament when they meant to enter RBC Heritage. And it might just be one of those situations that they're trying to avoid that because there's not enough appeal from the average person.
Exactly. And the other issue comes when you look at some of those alternate field events, a lot of times it's a much smaller pool of golfers that are relevant for our purposes, but there could be like 10 to 15 guys that we even normally would even consider playing in some of these other events. And then it's a bunch of kind of alternates and no name type guys that you don't really want to play. So that's what turns a lot of people off to getting into those fields. All right, Spence, I think that's a wrap for this week. We are pumped to be back. It feels like we are finally back in the full swing of things with golf. First major off the board. We're getting ready for another elevated event this week. We're getting the big names coming out to play now. I'm excited. I'm ready in the group of things. I'm trying to get my first King of the Draft crown and knock the audience off the throne. I don't know if we'll do it, but follow along. Come back next week. Watch us crown a hopefully new champion. Spence, did I forget anything?
If you're not doing so already, be sure to subscribe to Mayo Media Network over on YouTube. This will be the locked-in time moving forward. We're back to the standard going time for us on there. If you're not doing so already, you can follow me on Twitter at @TOffSports. You can get my model over there, any of the content that I've talked about numbers-wise with it. And you can follow Joel on Twitter at DraftMasterFlex.
Appreciate you, squad. Good luck this weekend. See you next week.